with walls up, you're not gonna connect with someone.
I'm excited to be chatting with Dan Byrne, the star of Paying for It. Dan, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Happy to be here.
I love this film. It is such a fascinating piece. It's funny, it's heartfelt. But what was it that drew you to it?
Well, certainly the graphic novel. I
Mm.
loved it when I read it, and the combination of Sook-Yin Lee's involvement, her being in the graphic novel, then her adapting it so many years later. It was just a really exciting creative cocktail that was very, very enticing for me.
Well, this is what's makes the film so fascinating. Of course, Sook-Yin is telling this story about her relationship with Chester, based on Chester's book, with her directing and involved and having characters play themselves. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like on set? Like, what was that? Because you're literally with the people who
Yeah.
lived this journey.
Yeah. So it was like the benefits of it was that if you ever had a question or if you ever felt like something wasn't right, like you were kind of surrounded by the authenticity and the confidence of people who could say, no, this is how it was, and here's what else it was really like. And we were shooting in the house that the whole book takes place in. We were in the neighborhood where everything was happening, the real locations and stuff. So, um, nothing was ever out of reach
Mm.
in terms of authenticity.
Well, with that being said, what strikes you most about Chester? Because, obviously you're bringing his character to life, and this film just feels so honest from start to finish,
Mhm.
unlike so many other stories that we get to hear. So, what struck you about him? What were those conversations like?
Yeah, I think you're right with the word honest. Like Chester is he's he's just completely unvarnished
Hmm.
in his like, both his innocence and his um you know, uninnocent impulses or whatever. Like he is, I think he very much believes that there is um, an inherent goodness in sharing the truth.
Mm.
And um, so meeting him, he's just like he walks that talk, and um, I find that really inspiring, and it was like kind of liberating to play a character like that who was just very comfortable in their own skin at all times.
Well, I think that's a great description of it because what we see here, I mean, lots of films have dealt with the topics of sexuality or had sexuality or dealt with the topic of sexuality. But this film is one of those ones that really wants to have a conversation about it rather
Mm,
than simply show you lots of sex. It's not like that.
yeah. Well, that
Um,
comes with the book as well. The book does kind of function as a bit of a polemic for the rights of sex workers and the politics around that. And so, um, if you read the book, you'll find that the last 10% is all just straight up notes and like full written pages. There's the drawings stop, and he just sort of is describing all of his opinions and stuff. And it was written in 2011, so things have changed. Or sorry, no, earlier than that. Uh, but things have changed, and um, so that's kind of that idea of like starting a conversation is very much inherent in the book as well, and I'm glad that that came through on your experience.
well, absolutely. Actually, that's one of the reasons I love this film is because it doesn't treat the topic flippantly, and cares very much about its characters and the people in the sex industry, and it's just a very different way of talking about it. But there's also this conversation going on with Chester seemingly about the notion of intimacy. And I was wondering, from your perspective, what do you think the line is between sex and intimacy?
Well, that's where Chester and I kind of deviate a little bit because I never really personally understand his distinction between like romantic love and like love. Like he has this sort of idea in the book and in the movie that you'll hear he talks about romantic love being kind of like a kind of possessiveness and a kind of like related to property or this kind of thing. And that feels to me psychologically rooted in some kind of experience that may not necessarily be universal. And so, I mean, I think how I would describe it is that it does change for different people. I think, human connection is, for better or worse, kind of an individual experience that we bring to each connection. Each of us have our fingerprint on our souls, and those don't necessarily interact. They don't necessarily agree all the time, and but when they do, it's magic.
Yes, it is interesting because, there's lines like Chester talks about romance wants you to own someone, and that's the same as slavery, which is a
It's an
very
extreme view.
extreme point of view. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's something that yeah, again, I think that's like coming from a personal place that his character is kind of enlarging to sort of fit the world, and I just don't know if it's a settled question.
of course. Well, I ask you this then too. What do you think is the building block, shall we say, of a good relationship?
Um, Gosh, well, I guess openness. Um, you know, with walls up, you're not gonna connect with someone. So like openness to someone else and openness to failure and a kind of receptiveness to other people's um, outreach to you.
I love that. Um, and I think we see that in this film, especially, without saying too much towards the end. Well, actually, even probably the whole way. Like you said, you describe Chester as someone who likes to share the truth. And I sort of get that from this character. Every experience he has, now, of course, we know he writes the book, but it just seems like he's processing it. It's like what was really happening in this moment. It's a really interesting way for a character to deal with these spaces.
Yeah, and then it's really once you meet him, it's like I think you get the sense of his character while reading the book. I certainly felt like I did, and then meeting him, it was just the ultimate confirmation of just like he is exactly how he presents himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really interesting. Um, you know, one of the things that I love about this film is, like you said, that wrestling with romantic love. And I would love to ask you. You said Chester sees a line between romantic love and love. Do you and you'd said that you sort of disagree with that. I was wondering, in your mind, could you expound on that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, Steve, that would be if I had figured anything out for certain.
Fair enough.
I would have an answer for you. Um, but uh, I think, sometimes when I approach difficult questions, I tend to kind of follow an instinct of the answer. Like a hypothesis plays a large part in big philosophical questions.
Yeah.
And so what I'm getting from that disconnect is a feeling that it's wrong. I don't know that it's wrong, but I get this feeling like that doesn't jive for me. There's friction there. So like really what I'm sensing is friction and not necessarily like the truth that is like disagreeing with me.
Right, right. No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's what I admire actually about Chester is that like he has decided, and I have a lot weaker ability to decide how things are, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, honestly, like Dan, the film, it's so fascinating, so much fun. What do you hope people take away from their time with paying for it?
Um, well, I hope that like this has our discussion I think has been very like rich and brings up interesting personal deep questions. And so I would hope that there's some sort of vibration in there that resonates with any individual that can then feel that it shifts something in their life or changes their perspective or um, certainly opens their minds to the rights of sex workers.
Absolutely. Because I think the film really delves with that well. You know, there's when we talk about sex work, I think there's a certain level of shame that's thrown on these women, men and women culturally. But
Hmm.
the film does what everything it can possible to remove that. I think and empower them in some incredible ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. The
Thank you.
film is great, and I wish you the best.
Well, same to you. We'll see you
Thanks
again
so much.
sometime.
Absolutely. Really
All
have a
right.
great day.